her image. She's built up this huge reputation. People were looking to her as an alternative. I remember when Agang was launched and the festivities and the excitement surrounding that. Now words that are coming up are that she's indecisive, having said that she'd never join the DA, even in her own book, saying that she wouldn't vote for the DA and her children wouldn't. Words such as politics of the stomach are coming to the fore, that she was put in a corner because Agang wasn't doing well, and now she has now compromised her position, and that the chances of her being president are very, very slim. So what does this do to her as an individual and a brand?
I think for her individually, there's a lot in it for her. But in joining the DA, she gets to be the presidential candidate. And the DA is, I think, is going to remain the second largest political party in parliament. It's the party that's been growing consistently, throughout the elections. So there's a lot in it, for her. But from where people stand on a principled point of view, she may argue, as she has argued, that when Nelson Mandela started talking to the nuts, there was a lot of skepticism. People saying he was selling out. But look where we are now because of Nelson Mandela. But is she going to get the same or reap the same rewards or benefits that Nelson Mandela reaped, and by extension the nation? That remains a moot point. But you can argue, as I said earlier, on the question or on the issues of principle. For someone who said, this is a bad party, I've spoken to everyone, I've looked at the DA and what it has to offer, and I think on principle, there is no way myself, my children, and the rest of the people that I represent should vote for the DA. And I think there are serious issues. And I think if politicians continue to behave like her, there's going to be a lot of problems. People are going to, have problems believing politicians. But on the other hand, when they look at people like Patricia de Lille and Mazibuko, and they have actually seen that over the years, they have actually brought the DA, yes, it's little steps, baby steps, but they have brought the DA closer, so to speak, to the left than has ever been the case before. Are those not benefits or things to be celebrated, and actually people moving en masse to actually change the face of the DA, if the ultimate prize is to get an alternative to the DA? But I want to touch on a point that you said, and that is money. Yeah. There is a serious money issue here, and I think we need to place it on record. There are people who are keen to fund alternatives to the ANC, and they have been battling because each person has come up with a small party that makes no difference. And in fact, as a matter of fact, the DA and Agang were brought together in part, probably in large part, by money that people are going to pour into their coffers so that they can start forming a formidable a party or challenge to the ANC. And that is a fact, and that has had a lot of influence, which now takes us back to the issues of principle. Is it principle that brought to Mamphela Ramphele to the DA? My answer is a definite no.
Now, you touched on Patricia de Lille, the former leader of the Independent Democrats, and that's what I want to ask from you now. Questions are being raised as to this move of joining Agang to the Democratic Alliance can be described as a merger, or is it a total acquisition, as we saw with the case of the ID? Is this the DA swallowing Agang up whole? We saw Dr. Mamphela Ramphele saying that they will still contest the provincial polls as an independent entity. What are the chances of that? Is this a merger or an acquisition?
They have been swallowed. End of the story. And there's something in it for the leader, well, there's something in it for the rest of her followers. I really don't think so. But there's that technical, or whatever they call it, committee that's going to work on the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of their coming together and what they are going to be put on. So it's a different thing from, Patricia de Lille had a party. She started a party from floor crossing, but she built that party, retained seats, but built upon what she said. She had, and then built a party that had more seats in parliament. She took those with her to the DA. So she had something concrete to put on the table. Dr. Ramphele is unknown quantity. Yeah. In fact, there's been a lot of disappointment. In fact, as she herself, I think, would confess, she hasn't actually gotten the kind of response from South Africans that she had hoped for. Hence, she is going to the DA. So you can't, strictly speaking, compare the two. There's something in it for her, but I think there's nothing in the DA for the rest of her followers.
People describing Agang as a stillborn, saying that Dr. Mamphela has abandoned it even before we saw the fruition of what the party could have done come the elections 2014.
I think there's every truth in
that. Is that true? And what do the aggrieved parties of Agang do now? Where to for them now?
Well, I think it's a choice they have to make, because I think they have themselves to blame for never having sat down and actually worked on the underlying principles. In other words, what was it about Agang that was different from anything else that any party in South Africa had to offer? And my answer to that there was nothing, right? So they followed Dr. Ramphele, because they were too embarrassed perhaps to follow Helen Zille or to go with the DA. So Mamphela Ramphele was a sort of more acceptable compromise. Now that she has betrayed them, what do they do? I think it's a decision they will have to make, but it was never about principle. It was always about her. Now that she has betrayed them, they have themselves to blame, and it's for them to decide what to do next.
In Dr. Mamphela's defense, she's always said that she's in negotiations and discussions with the likes of the Democratic Alliance.
But she had always underlined that with issues of principle. Yeah. Hence her criticism of the DA, and her insisting that the DA is not the kind of party that South Africans sharing her past and sharing her vision of the future should vote for. And where does she go now? To the very same party, not to any other party. So politics, politicians. Politicians.
People asking this morning, why did she even decide to form Agang? People asking, very aggrieved as well, and some also supporting the fact that two formidable women could be at the helm of the opposition in South Africa. So I think the jury is still out as to whether or not this is a good move. Questions also being raised as whether or not the sidelines, Patricia Delo, we saw in some of the newspaper articles as well, the place of Lindiwe Mazibuko as well, also coming to the fore.
But you do have to give the DA credit for venturing when no other party dares to venture, for experimenting. They have been creative. Give them, that. And a lot of what they have actually done has actually worked. I mean, look at where's Athol Trollip? Just confined to the Eastern Cape, but the party hasn't stopped growing. And I think as this election will show, I think they will grow, marginally perhaps, but they will continue to grow. So you've got to give them credit on that one.
Indeed. I think interesting times we're looking into coming up to the elections. I know various journalists salivating at the thought of covering these elections. Let's leave it there for now, but we do stay in the topic of politics and politicians. The ANC has held back on its releasing of the final list of candidates for Parliament and provincial legislatures for the upcoming election.